Listen, I'm not here to tell you which teams to root for, okay? But I will suggest that if you do not have a horse left in the NFL race, you might want to consider pulling for Philip Rivers, an all-time great player and by all accounts a great person who has done absolutely everything that a quarterback can do except win, which means in the eyes of too many people, he hasn't hardly done anything at all. He was drafted in 2004. That is the only draft class ever to produce two quarterbacks who won more than one Super Bowl. Now, did you know that Rivers has a higher career passer rating than Ben or Eli? And does that even matter? He's also thrown the most touchdowns of any quarterback to never play in a Super Bowl. I ask you, is that a good statistic or a bad statistic? He's played his whole career in the shadow, not only of those two, but of course in his own conference of two even bigger stars. In every year but one, since Rivers came into the NFL, the AFC quarterback in the Super Bowl has been Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or Roethlisberger. And now in his own division, he's staring at a kid who was 8 years old in 2004, who appears ready to own the AFC for a very long time. So this feels like Rivers' best shot, and maybe it's his last. Here's a guy who does not swear. He has this funny delivery. He is married to his sweetheart from junior high school, and they are currently expecting their 9th child. He has never beaten Tom Brady, and if he does this weekend, he may then have to beat Mahomes to make it, and he'll have to do it all on the road. So I have no idea if he can finally get this done. But I can tell you one thing for certain. I, for one, will be rooting for him. Let me bring that to the table here, because I think that at times like this, it is appropriate to talk about legacy and what a difference to the legacy of a football player it would make for Philip Rivers to lead this team, which is capable of it, to a Super Bowl.
Look, legacies are always cemented in championship concrete, so to speak, right? I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is for him. All the things he has done individually, all the things that his team has done collectively, up until the point of Super Bowl appearances, which they don't have any, and or rather, he hasn't been to, and or Super Bowl championships, it really doesn't matter. When you really want to be talked about in the same vein and in the same breath as some of the great quarterbacks of all time, which is what we're going to be talking about with Philip here as his career winds down, you will cement yourself in that conversation if you win championships. So obviously, it's huge. It's very, very important. Or otherwise, he's always going to be on the outside looking into that conversation.
Well, I'm part of that, Greeny. You said you're going to be rooting for him. I mean, he played most of his career in San Diego. It was a smaller market. Now they're in L.A., this big market. They play in front of 27,000 fans that are largely not their own. So you look at Philip Rivers, who's really there to champion him? It's not like he plays for the Dallas Cowboys or the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New York Giants. He's out there doing himself early in his career. He had LaDainian Tomlinson. You know, he had guys that were around him, the young Gates, and now they've revamped this roster. They put the pieces around him. They've got a good defense, and like you said, they are in position right now for probably his last best shot before this Chiefs wagon begins to get rolling too far down the road.
I covered the Chargers in 2013 when they were still in San Diego, and watching the way that Philip Rivers would go through his daily, just regular things, the way he was around the office there, the way that he was in practice, just always conducting himself with that class that you talked about right there. And I think when we talk about him, a lot of people wonder, is he a Hall of Famer? With who we've seen play quarterback in this century, do you think that he is, and how does he stack up against some of those guys?
Yeah, I do. Look, I've always been a big fan of his. I think he's been one of the great quarterbacks to play this game. His statistics say he is. Now, what's interesting about Philip is I really do believe that aesthetically some people have a problem with the way he plays the game because it doesn't look like some of the classic throwers that we've seen come through this great league. But look, as far as efficiency is concerned and him getting the job done, he is a Hall of Fame caliber. And if he wins the Super Bowl this year, I think that will absolutely cement it for sure. Because, look, there is a subjective component to putting people in the Hall of Fame. We know that. We know people have their preferences as far as, does this guy kind of meet what I'm looking for? Rather, and it's not about stats. It's just about, does he look like a Hall of Famer? And sometimes Philip doesn't look like it the way he plays it. But when you look at the stat sheet and how effective he is, he's one of the best.
Well, and you mentioned the quirky throwing motion. I mean, he's Dan Marino's mobility with Vince Young's throwing motion. Like, it just doesn't look good. There's nothing pretty. He doesn't have these massive highlights.
Yeah, he looks like, you know what? Hey, I played with Bernie Kosar at the very end in Cleveland. It's kind of sometimes like that. But it's just so effective still. And because, you know, Philip, the thing that Philip is all about is if you listen to him, you listen to the TV copy, if you can hear what's going on up there in New England, look at how much Philip is responsible for at the line of scrimmage. He's brilliant. He's brilliant. He's one of the very best. That's what really, for me, makes him as great as he is.